Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Hayomi. Menachos Daf Nun Dalet. We begin on the very last line of Nun Gimel and Beis. So it's the Tanu Rabbanon at the very end of that last line. Tanu Rabbanon back to the Shtei Alechem that we bring on Shavuos, or the Chalais of the Torah, which are meant to be chametz, those of which that are chametz. How do we make them chametz? How do we get them to rise? What type of leavening agent do we use? Tanu Rabbanon ein machmitzin b'tapuchim. You're not meant to use apple-related extract, apple juice, to process the dough to turn into chametz, because it's not really going to properly produce proper chametz. It's not going to do a good job. Mishum Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel Amru. So it was said in the name of Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, you may use apple juice. Machmitzin. He holds that it does achieve a proper chimutz. Rav Kahana Mastilo, he had a different version, a different name. Instead of Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, it was Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian. Okay, that was his opinion. You may use apple material. Says the Gemara. Okay, so according to one shita, apples will produce proper chametz. According to the other shita, it does not produce chametz. So now let's take a look at the next Mishnah. Kaman Azla Desnan. What about the next Mishnah? Whose shita is this going to be following? We have a Mishnah which speaks about an apple, a truma apple. Okay, so it's forbidden for an ordinary person other than a kohen to consume. So you have Elhot Desnan. Tapuach sheriskai. So you crush the apple, and you place it into a dough, a regular dough, a chulin dough, a non-truma dough, b'chimtza, and it actually made it chametz. So you have ordinary dough material, which was turned into chametz by way of a truma leavening agent. The thing is, it wasn't really a proper leavening agent, it was an apple. Harizu asura. This dough, which now turned into chametz, cannot be consumed by a person other than a kohen. Why? Because since it was turned into chametz, it was processed through truma, it now is sort of relabeled as truma material, because the truma element within it is discernible, very discernible within the dough, since it transformed it into a chametz dough. So now it's treated like, the entire dough is treated like a truma product. And the question is, but he didn't use regular yeast, he used an apple. Does that also make chametz? Come on. Whose opinion is reflected in this Mishnah? Lema, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, v'lo Rabbanan. Is it only going like Rabbi Chanina, who says that an apple can accomplish such, and not like the Rabbanan, who say that an apple cannot do chametz? I feel with him, Rabbanan. You know what? Even according to the Rabbanan, need the chametz gomer lehavi. They never said that apple material cannot achieve any degree of chimutz. It can't make proper, high quality chametz, which is needed for the mincha. Chametz, the chametz gomer lehavi, but nuksha, sort of a shaky, poor quality chametz, miyahavi, it still can make, and as such, it's treated like truma. So there was a degree of chametz, of chimutz, that was achieved by way of the truma apple, and therefore the dough is now treated like truma material. So once again, regarding a mincha, we're meant to use a proper leavening agent. What about apple material? Machlekes. But all agree it does achieve some degree, and therefore regarding truma, it is reckoned with. Amar b'ila, ein lecha hakosher l'kmitza, yoser minchas chayte. The kmitza scoop process is pretty challenging for the kohen to do. He's got to get it right. He's got to get the right amount in there and smooth out the top and the bottom. Make sure there's nothing protruding from the three fingers. It has to be properly paced, properly spaced. And the most difficult of all is a minchas chayte, a mincha of a sinner, which is bare, it's dry, it's just flour. Very hard to get a proper scoop from that. Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi Amar, not so terrible. Minchas choite, it's not bare bones, it's not necessarily going to be dry. Megavel b'mayim mukshera, you can mix in a little water, dough it up a little bit. You don't put oil in there, fine, but water, that's okay, and therefore you have a proper dough, and then it makes for a relatively smooth scoop. So basically we have a machlekes. Can one mix water into minchas chayte? Leima b'kamiflegi. So first of all, before we get to that point, it would seem that all agree you can mix in water. But nevertheless, Rav Ila still considers it a very difficult scoop. Why? What's the machlekes about? If it's dough, if it's easy material, what's the problem? It's a problem of quantity. Because technically the mincha consists of pure flour. Now you're going to mix in some water to make for an easier, more convenient kmitza. But perhaps when you measure up the kmitza, you have to ensure that you get the same quantity of flour into your kmitza as it would be without the water, which is a pretty difficult task to evaluate how much flour would be needed without the water. Right? So it's a pretty difficult task. You can have it both ways. Rashi explains you can have a sort of a watery dough, in which case it's sort of bloated. Right? So now you have to add more flour, because if it would be just flour without that bloat, it would be more. So you have to add more flour. On the other hand, you can have this dough which is now compact and compressed, very little water, so it's sort of condensed, and more of it will fit into a smaller place than if it would be just flour. So in this case, you have to do a smaller kmitza than if it would be just flour. So you got to pace yourself relative to pure flour. Pretty difficult task. So perhaps that's what Rav Ila had in mind. All agree this is a legal move, you're allowed to contribute some water. But the question is about being mishair. Mishair is a lashon of shir. How do we measure it up? Leima b'kamiflegi, perhaps the machlekes revolves around this question. The Marasavar, k'may shein misharina, and one shita says, as is. Forget about what it would be if it would be just, this is what it is, scoop it, move on. Whereas Rabbi Ila held, no. Imagine as though it's just flour. You have to do the kmitza in a manner which befits flour. That's a pretty challenging task, to evaluate how much flour would be needed to fill that scoop. Says him lie. So perhaps that's why he considers it such a difficult task. Lie, no. The kuliyama k'moishem sharin, everybody agrees it's based on the current form. We don't have to go back in time and view it as though it's dry material. Just scoop it the way it is. So what's the difficulty involved? The answer is like this. Rav Ila held you can't mix in water. He says dry is dry. So we're back to flour, and that's pretty difficult. Machlekes is as follows. The Marasavar, Rav Ila holds, my chareva, when the pasuk calls it chareva dry, it means dry, as can be, bone dry. Chareva mishem, he says it has to be dry of oil. That's Rabbi Yitzchak's shita, right? Rabbi Yitzchak says it has to be dry of oil. No oil, but water is legal. Marasavar charevim kol davar, Rav Ila says just the opposite. Chareva, bone dry, flour. No, to scoop flour properly and get it in there just right is pretty challenging. Okay, now on this topic of k'may shehein, look at it in its current form, or lik'may shehayu, treat it like the way it was in its original format. This is actually a machlekes coming up regarding other matters. Tanan Hasam, we have a Mishnah over there in Maseches Uktzin actually. So we know that a kazayis amount of nevela flesh, right? Karkas flesh is tummy, right? Touch it, become tummy. but it has to be a kazayas. Okay, so it has to contain the volume of an olive. Suppose it was a kazayas, but then it shrunk by way of evaporation or whatever, or the opposite, it was smaller and then it bloated, and now it's a kazayas. So currently it has one status, but previously it had a different status. Which stage do you look at? It's not awesome. Beside egel, you have the bus or the flesh of a calf, of a young animal that died, which typically would bloat afterwards. So it bloated, and now it's up to a kazayas. Or ubesar zakenish nismaich, you have the bus of an older animal which shrunk. So it started kazayas, but now it's less. In both cases, mishtaran l'kamay shehein. We treat it the way it is. L'kamay shehein. Now, what exactly does l'kamay shehein mean? Its former size or its current volume? We have machlekes. Rav, Reb Chiya, Reb Yochanan. So these three Amoraim understood. Amri, they say mishtaran kamay shehein. The Mishnah meant kamay shehein, the way it is now, as is. Less than a kazayas, it's tahor. A kazayas or more, it's tamei. Shmuel, however, Rabbi Shimon Rebbe, and Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rebbe, and Reish Lakish. So these three Chachamim disagree. Amri, they learned the Mishnah meant mishtaran likamais shehein. We evaluate it based on its former status, the way it was originally, not in its current form, but in its original form. So, in the case of the young one, the Basara Egel, which had been less than a kazayas, it's tar, despite the fact that it's now grown to a kazayas. And just the opposite in the Basara of the Zakena. Just because it's less than a kazayas now, because it shrunk, we ignore that factor. We look at it the way it was before it shrunk. It was a kazayas, it's tamei. Meis, here comes a kasha on Reish Lakish, who says we look at the original format. May say Basar Egel Shloihayu B'Kashir. Okay, the Brisa speaks about this very case. The bras of the egel which had less than a shear, v'tafach, and it bloated, it expanded, v'amad al kashir. Now you have a shear or kazayis. Tor lishavar. So until this point, until it achieved the kazayis, it was tar. V'tamei b'kan laba. But going forward, it is going to be tamei because that is a kazayis. So we see that what determines its status, the current format. That's a kasha on the other opinions. Midrabanan says the Gemara. Minatayra really it's tar. Midrabanan it looks like a kazayis. We give it tumah. Yoch, if that's the case, that it's only midrabanan. Amos say, look at the next part of the brayse. The same concept applies to other issues. Pigel, noisar, faulty, carbon material. But the halacha is that if one eats it, he gets kares, right? Pigel is where the Kayin had some sort of illegal thought when he was doing the carbon. Noisar is the carbon material that's left over beyond the expiration date. There too, the kares punishment only applies if one eats a kazayis of these materials, and we say apply the same principle. If it grows, if it bloats, if it expands, from that moment forward, it has the status of a kazayis of forbidden material. Now, iyamas b'shleima de'raisa. So, if this price is relating to isurim min Torah, not just min Rabbanan, that would explain pigul and isa, which are isurim min Torah, right? Hainadik pigul and isa. El iyamas Rabbanan. But if you claiming that the price is merely speaking about dinim of the Rabbanan applied a tumah to the nevela because it looks like a well, that you can say by tumah of a nevela they applied a tumah of the Rabbanan, but pigul and isa, where we're speaking about a kares, which is the Iraisa punishment, but the Rabbanan mi'ika. We don't really have a rabbinic element relating to pigul v'noisar. So how could you speak about pigul v'noisar having the status of such only with the Rabbanan? Ema v'chein betumas pigul, v'chein betumas noisar. We do have a rabbinic element of pigul v'noisar as well. You see, with the Rabbanan, these materials become tamei. Chachamim, there was one reason in the Gemara that the Chacham wanted to discourage this type of behavior, making pigul noisar, so they made a tamei midrabanan. That's what the brayse means. that once they achieve a status, a kazayas in volume, they are tamei midrabanan. So again, we're only speaking about the rabbanan, but of course, Menachos, according to Reish Lakish, we don't, reckon with the current size, rather with its previous volume. And the point of the Brisa is to highlight that even perhaps I would think, perhaps I would say, these tumas of pigul v'noiser to begin with, even if it's a properly sized piece of meat, it's only the rabbanon, right? There's no concept of this type of tumah Menachos. So perhaps the whole thing to start with is only the rabbanon. Now you're going to add another layer of the rabbanon to that and say, well, even in the case where it fluctuated and now it's bloated, it's also tamei. And the answer is, yeah, we don't differentiate. If it has a kazayis, we treat it as such. Again, perhaps I would think, since v'tumas pigul, v'tumas noiser, the idea, the concept of these types of tumas to begin with is only the rabbanon. Kulihai, perhaps to this extent, but the rabbanon, regarding a tumah, the rabbanon, the rabbanon would not apply such a stringency. Kamashwan, the point is yes, that if it achieved the kazayis, volume, we treat it as such with respect to tumas, regular tumas nevela, whether it's a tumah pigul v'noiser, which to begin with is only the rabbanon. We treat it as a kazayis and it's mitam. Okay, Tashmai comes another question. On those opinions that we ignore the current, rather we focus on the former size, the original size. Tashma basar zaken shayibak yashir. Okay, once again the same idea. The basar of an older animal which had a required volume, had the kazayis, but samak, and it shrunk, and now it's upachas mikashir, to less than a shear. Tam l'shavar, until the point of shrink, it was tamei, but going forward, it's tar, because it lost its volume. So actually, this is going to be a kasha on the other opinion. The other opinions that say that we look at the so there's a kasha on the opinion that say that we look at the former status. Here we say that it's all about currency. Okay, whatever it is now, it's less than a shear. It's tar. V'tar mekan labo. Okay, so it's a kasha on Shmuel, on Shem Berebi, and Reish Lakish. Okay, so it's the second kasha on their sheet. Amar Rabbah. Let me explain to you what's going on. Let's recalibrate the whole discussion. I know we had a machlekes, right? But it's not as simple as we thought. They look at the current, they look at the former. No. Whenever the item initially had the required volume, now it doesn't. No longer has it, it's shrunk. Says Rabbi, you know what? Show's over. It doesn't have a shear, it's over. According to all opinions. It no longer has the original status, because it's lacking the other shear. What about the other way around? Initially, it did not possess a kazayis. Now it grew, it bloated, and it has a kazayis. In this case, all agree it's only with the rabbanon. Rashi says, Lav Isser, really, the bottom line here, it's not genuinely an Isser, because it's elamai ba'alma, it's moisture, it's not really actual meat. Right? So it looks like a kazayis, we give it the status and midrabanan. Okay, so it's tamei midrabanan. So this is universal. Machlekes will be in the following case only. Keep thinking. When do we have a machlekes at all? When it fluctuated down and then back up. So it had a kazayis, and it sort of shrunk, and then it regained its original format, its original volume. Shall we say it's now restored to its original status minat Torah, or do we say no? Once you lost it, you lost it. Keep thinking. Machlekes will be it had a shear, had a kazayis, but samak, it shrunk somewhat, then it regained, it rebloated, it re-expanded. It's back up there. So what's its status? Minat Torah. I understand, but the Rabbanon, it's metame, as we explained, but minat Torah. The Mara Savar Yeshticha B'Yisura. So Reb Shimon, Rish Lakish, they hold that once it lost its shear, even though it regained it afterwards, it has dichoy. Dichoy means it gets rejected. It lost its standing. Right? So the Isser is gone. Yesh dichoy b'Isura. So although it regained its former volume, it's only Tamim Midrabanan. Torah, it's already it lost its Isser, it lost its Tumah. Umar Savar. Whereas the the first group of Chacham, Reb Chia, Reb Yechon, they disagree. They say, look, I understand that in the interim period we didn't have a kazayis, and you couldn't consider it asur not Torah, but now it's back up there. It regained its former status, and it's just as asur as it was, and it's just as tamid as it was minat Torah. Says the Gemara, can you even suggest that there's an opinion that it holds dichoy when it comes to Isser? Once it lost it, Atnan. We have a Mishnah, Kabetza Eichlan, Shenichan B'chama. You have food, which is tamei, and you have an egg volume amount of that food, which has the ability now to impart tumah, to spread tumah. So you left it out in the sun, it dried up a bit, mismatu, and it got shrunken. It's now less than a kibetza. And likewise, other examples of size fluctuations, you have a kazayis of a deceased person. Kazayis mananavelo, of a dead animal, a lentil-sized portion of a lizard, a creature, which is matami. Kazayis pigel, kazayis noiser, kazayis chaylev, or kazayis of all kinds of forbidden foods, pigel, noiser, or chaylev, forbidden fats. Once they lost their required, volume, tahir, they're going to be tahir, and there's no longer the isurim, vein chayar malem mishum pigel v'noiser v'chaylev. The isur is gone. Okay, because currently it's not a shear. What if you put it back outside and it regained its former volume? And you can put it out in the rain, in the moisture. V'tavchu, and they blowed it, and it's back up there. It's main. Okay, they regained their tumah. And regarding the forbidden foods, they regained their isur. Chayav nalem mishum pigel v'noiser v'chaylev. Despite the fact that in the interim period, they didn't possess the shear. That's a straight out kasha and a refutation to the opinion that holds of dichoy, tiyufta, amandama, yesh dichoy yisur. In fact, it's a tiyufta, it's a final refutation. Okay, so bottom line, according to this approach, whenever there's a fluctuation, up or down, Rabbi tells us we look at the current status. It's only when we have a two-way fluctuation, it went down, then went back up. That's a question of dichoy, which we had a machlokes. Okay. Toshma, here comes a raya, a kasha, from a brayse to sefta, Mesechas Trumis, which speaks about separating the maser, which is 10%. Right? You have 100 figs, give 10 to the kohen, 10 to the Levi. I'm going to show from there, it's going to appear from there, that we ignore the current status. Rather, we focus on the former, original status. So regarding figs, we have two formats. We have fresh figs, which are obviously more in terms of volume, versus the dried figs, which are compressed and dehydrated. Te'enim are the fresh ones, grey-grays are the dried ones. So if he has 100 fresh ones, separates 10, he's good to go. 100 dried, again 10 out of 100. But what if he wants to mix and match? So the numbers are good, but the volumes are different. Fresh fig is much plumpier than a dried fig. How do you work this out? Toshma, so the Bryce is like this. Term to Einem ala gregris. You can choose to take off 10 fresh figs on the 90 dried ones, b'minyan. Assuming you work with numbers. 10 fresh on the 90 dried. But don't do a volume-related evaluation, because then you're going to end up with less than 10 fresh figs. If you look at volume, because each fresh fig is bigger than a dried fig, so you're going to do less than 10 to achieve your 10%. You shouldn't do that. So just use numbers. 10 fresh on the 90 dried. Now, This works well if you look at the original format. So you view the dried ones as if they're still fresh. So it's a fair deal. 10 out of 100, you're good. But if you look at it in its current form, you're doing way more than you need. You're separating way more masa than you need because you're taking 10 fresh over to accommodate 90 dried. It's way more than 10%. And that's problematic. Vitani, you have a brisa, you can't take off maser as you wish. It has to be exactly 10%. A person takes off too much maser, sure, the rest of the fruit's okay. But the maser that you separate is mikulkal. It's sort of ruined because within this 10%, if it's more than 10%, so within this separated portion, you have partially maser and partially not maser, so it's all mixed in. It's a problem, right? The part that's maser goes to the Levi, but there's part in there that doesn't belong there. That's still tevel. That wasn't really addressed. You didn't take off maser on that, so you got a mess in this. So basically, you shouldn't do more than 10%. And here, when he takes fresh for the dried, you're ending up with more than you need. Elamai. So what do you want to say? Apparently, this halacha teaches us. This halacha confirms that we always evaluate based on the original format. Okay, fine. So that explains why we don't care fresh, dried. The point is, even the dried figs you have sitting there are treated as though they're still fresh. We look at it as though it's still in its original format, and therefore you can do the 10 fresh figs on those dried ones. Amos safe. Okay, so if that's the case, let's move on to the next halacha in that same brisa, which seems to contradict it. Gregors alteinim. Suppose he did the other way around. He took the gregors, the dried figs, and used them as maser alteinim on the fresh ones. How do you do that? B'midah. This time ensure that it's 10% in volume, which can be more than 10 figs because they're dry. So you need more than that, more than 10 to get you to achieve the 10% of the entire supply of the fresh figs. Okay. So here we seem to have changed course. If the rationale behind this formula is look at it in its current form, that explains why you have to compensate for the dried figs. You have to add to get to the 10%, because one dried fig does not equal one fresh fig. So you have to add more to the dried figs to get you 10% of the entire fresh fig mix. But if it's about the original format, so he's going to be adding too much maser because the 10% of the dried figs that are being used as maser on the fresh figs are perfectly fine. Right? Even if it's 10 dried figs on 90 fresh, it's fine, that's fair. Because these 10 dried figs are viewed as fresh figs, the kamoishen, as though they were still fresh. And you're telling me you have to add to the 10. You have to achieve 10% in terms of volume. You're adding to the maser. That's a problem. So basically, within the brisa, we seem to have a contradiction, because if the focus is on the original format, that would explain the first part of the brisa, that we treat the dry as though they're still fresh. But here we say no, it's the opposite. We don't treat the dry as though they're fresh. You have to add to the dry to get you 10% because of their shrunken size. So here you're working with its current form. So we're self-contradicting. Allah says, the Gemara, you're right. The brisa is not talking about maser, which is the 10% portion given to the Levi. We're talking about Truma Gedela, which takes place before. That's the part that's given to the Kohen. And although in the Torah we don't have a precise amount, a minimum amount, but with the Rabbanon, you're meant to give generously. Rashi brings it. A real generous person, 1 part in 40. An average person, 1 part in 50, which is 2%. Stingy person, 1 in 60. So you're meant to be generous. And therefore, we employ a system which employs generosity. Allah was speaking about a fellow who separated not Maser, he's separating Truma. Maser has to be a precise 10%. Truma Gedolah can be, as you wish. So although, you're right, halachically speaking, it's all about currency, it's all about what's happening now. But the Brisa advises us to employ a system of separation which is inherently generous. That's why we always go to Chumrah. We always take the more generous approach. In the first halach in the Brisa, you can end up giving more than you need. Right? Because that's the way it is. Ayin Yofa. V'reisha b'ayin Yofa. V'seifa b'ayin Yofa. Okay, so that explains both halachas in the Brisa. In the Seifa, it makes sense that you have to work with volume because the dried figs are currently shrunken. And you look at the current situation. So you have to add based on volume. You can't look at just numbers, you have to do it based on volume. But in the Reisha, even though halachically speaking, looking at the current situation, you can just work with volume. Fresh figs on the dried figs, you don't need as many because they're fresh, they're big, they're plump. Use less. No, the point is, want to be generous, so we ignore the volume aspect and we just look at the numbers and you separate accordingly to give a generous donation. So we're speaking about Truma Gedolah. How do you explain the next part of the Brisa? Amar B'Elazar Rabbi Yossi, Abba, my father Rabbi Yossi, Yunatel Eser Gregor Shmiktzei Al Tishn Shpkal Kala. When he separated the Gregores, the dried figs, Shmiktzei, which was in that kli called Miktzaya. That's why, by the way, Rashi says it's called Ketziyos. We find many times that the dried figs are called Ketziyos because they use this kli, this utensil called a Miktzaya. In any case, when he separated the dried on the al tishim shebekal on the 90 that was sitting in the basket, the fresh figs, he would do it by number. 10 dried to accommodate 60 fresh, 90 fresh. So he worked with numbers, not with volume. So before we get involved in the the question of the the mathematics, but if it's Truma Gedolah, it's not a 10% system. Even Truma Gedolah, according to you, we're talking about Truma Gedolah, Eser Ma'avite. Why is he talking about 10? Truma Gedolah is 2%, 3%, right? Oh, so now we're stuck. Says the Allah Hacha b'Trumas Maser Askinan. The answer is we're not talking about Truma Gedolah, because then it wouldn't relate to 10%. We're not talking about regular Maser Rishon or whatever. That's exactly 10%. That has to be precisely 10%, without any generosity or fluctuation. Rather, we're talking about a third type, Trumas Maser. Hacha b'Trumas Maser Askinan. Trumas Maser is the 10% tithing that the Levi gives off his Maser Rishon. So he gets 10% Maser Rishon. From that, he gets 10% and gives it to the Kohen. The halach is just like by Truma Gedolah, it's given to generosity and given to your own inclinations of what you want to give. Same thing with Trumas Maser. Elocha b'Trumas Maser askina v'Abelazar ben Goimel, going like this Shita is Sanya. Abelazar ben Goimel Omer v'nechshav lechem trumaschem. So the pasuk here speaks about the Trumas Maser that a Levi gives to the Kohen. But the pasuk connects this Trumas Maser that a Levi gives to the Kohen to a different Truma. The pasuk says this will be like that Truma. Which Truma? It's going back to Truma Gedolah that Yisrael gives to a Kohen from his granary. So we have this connection. We see that Trumas Maser somehow relates to Truma Gedolah, has similar halachas. That doesn't have an exact, precise amount. You can give more than 10% as well. Bishtei Trumos Achas Medabet. Pasuk is relating to two Trumos. Achas, one is Truma Gedolah, Va'achas, and the other one is Trumas Maser. To compare the two, Kashem She Truma Gedolah, just like Truma Gedolah, and tell us Ba'omed Umachshava. We find that by Truma Gedolah, you don't measure it, right? 2%, whatever. You just sort of evaluate and give accordingly. Machshava is a chiddush. You don't have to actually physically remove it to make it truma, even just machshava. One's thought process commits it to truma. Kach trumas maser, same thing trumas maser. Tell us why machshava, even though there is a 10% amount there, but it's not something that you measure. You just sort of evaluate, you estimate. Machshava, and machshava as well can turn into trumas maser. So it needs to be, 10%, but not a measured 10%. And here comes the punchline. You can give more if you want. Ma Truma Gedolah, just like by Truma Gedolah ba'ayin yofa, you can give generously. There's no maximum amount. Af Trumas Maser ba'ayin yofa, likewise Trumas Maser, can be given generously. Okay, so that saved the day, because the Brisa again is talking about a type of Truma that allows for generosity. So in that first part of the Brisa, where he did the fresh on the dry, and he gave more than he needed to, because the fresh are bigger than the dry, and we look at the current situation, so this is bigger than that one. Why do we give so much? The answer is he was generous. Says the Gemara Umina, but one second, let's go back to this very verse of the Brisa that we were just relating to. That's going to undo our whole arrangement here. Because what did we just say? Amar B'Lazar, Rabbi Yossi, Abba, he quotes his father, he had a kalkala, a basket of fresh figs. He had 90 in there, and he would take 10 grey dried figs sitting in the other container and use it as the, let's say, okay, so we're talking about Trumas Maser, fine. But how is that enough? In this case, he's actually going down. He's giving less than he should. So we spoke about being generous. Fine, that explained the first part of the Brisa, but here he's using numbers. 10 shrunken figs on 90 fresh, bloated figs. That's unfair. That's less than 10%. Now, if we look at something the way it was initially, so great. So the dried aren't really dried, they're still fresh. So it's a fair 10%. But it's the current status that we look at. These are dried, way small in the fresh. So you have less than you need. These 10 that you're using as the Trumas Maser, they're 10, all right, but they're teeny 10s. They're shrunken. They're not going to work for the fresh. How do you explain this? Says the Gemara, you know what? It's a good point. But Rabbi Yossi obviously holds. When it comes to dehydrated figs, we treat it differently. We treat them as fresh. You know why? When he came on Blazer, he quoted Blazer, Shani Gregors. Dried, dehydrated figs are different. They're different than other shrunken materials like meat. You take those dried figs, throw them into a pot, cook them up really well. Load them up with moisture, and they're back to their former size. Okay, so it regains its moisture and it's back to its former glory, in which case we treat even a dried fig. That's why we treat even a dried fig as though it's a fresh fig. And 10 of the dried can work as Trumas Maser on the 90 fresh. But it seems like it's a specific halacha regarding dried figs only. In any case, we had an interesting machlekes. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Let's start actually from the beginning of the daf. We spoke about turning the mincha into chametz by way of a proper leavening agent. What about tapuchim? What about machlekes, whether that's allowed? We spoke about interesting machlekes about minchas choyte. Some hold, although you don't mix in any oil, but water is okay. Then according to Rabbi's explanation, we came out like this, that the nevela meat, or etc., which shrunk, is no longer regarded. But and if it actually bloated from less than a kazayis to a kazayis, that's only tamei midrabanan. What if it went back and forth? It was lost and it regained. That's a machlekes, whether we say yesh dicha b'yisurin, which was actually refuted from our brayso, where we proved that it regains its former isur, its former tumah. What about the brayso with the dried figs and the fresh figs? So we concluded that we're speaking about a type of truma that allows for generosity. In which case, although halachically we look at its current format, which wouldn't necessitate 10 fresh figs on the 90 dried, because you're giving way more than you need. Right? Because the dried figs are smaller, you need less than what you're doing. But you can add to it. Made a chiddush from Rabbi Yossi that even in a case where it doesn't allow for adding, like the even in a case where you'll end up with less, like the 10 dried, which you're trying to use for the fresh, which is less than 10%, that shouldn't be okay if you look at the current situation. But he says that gregors are different because they can regain their former glory by way of a proper cook-up. All the best to you, and Hatzlacha.